South Africa today. At a Johannesburg university, students burn the national flag, protesting planned celebrations of the Republic's 20th anniversary. These students resent the system of apartheid, the separate development of blacks and whites. Today, black militancy is increasing, and it will soon be the 5th anniversary of a landmark in that political awareness, the 1976 Soweto riots. Soweto, June 16, 1976. Student demonstrations are called to protest inferior education and the use of Afrikaans in black schools. The demonstrations erupt into South Africa's worst ever race riot. They continue almost non-stop for nearly a week. To restore order, police and army units kill nearly 260 blacks, more than half of them under the age of 18. Today, nearly 5 years later, the scars remain. Burnt-out beer halls, gutted offices, and ruined shops. Why did the violence happen? That's still being hotly debated. And it's even now the subject of the most costly, complicated, and lengthy lawsuit in South African legal history. The Government Administration Board for Soweto is asking its insurance company for about $12 million for property destroyed 5 years ago. The insurance company, Santam, is one of the country's largest, and it's refusing to pay. It claims the violence resulted from a people's revolution, and so wasn't covered by the insurance policies issued just a week before the riots. So the West Rand Administration Board is calling hundreds of mostly black witnesses to say that what happened here 5 years ago was a civil disturbance aggravated by police behavior and not at all a wholesale insurrection. It's an important lawsuit because of the principle at stake. Were the police responsible for provoking the riots? One person who's often criticized police overreaction is prominent black activist Dr. Untato Matlana.
I'd say it was a localized civil disturbance, which the police then proceeded to convert in the usual stupid way into almost a national revolution. I mean, if they had allowed the children to demonstrate, as they were doing at Orlando West, if they had listened to the grievances about Afrikaans, I don't think anything would have happened. But the behavior of the police, in shooting and rounding up people, simply added oil to an already unstable and very dangerous situation.
Whatever the result of the case before the Rand Supreme Court, most social workers agree the Soweto violence had certain deep-lying, long-term causes. Causes that go further than police behavior on a summer day 5 years ago. For in this sprawling black ghetto near Johannesburg, 1.5 million people live, and live badly. Between 7 and 14 of them to a house. Few houses have proper floors. The streets need repair, and sewers overflow where children play. The authorities offer new housing for sale, but few can afford the $10,000 price tag. Social workers also cite unemployment as a major factor in Soweto's instability. There are 2 million unemployed in South Africa, most of them blacks. They've been subject to labor laws that have meant industrial and trade union segregation. Blacks have been excluded from certain jobs on racial grounds, and past laws have restricted their freedom of movement. now new legislation has given greater opportunities to black workers. And every morning in Soweto, those with jobs travel to downtown Johannesburg. But for the unemployed black, the search for a job begins before dawn. Lines form outside the local employment exchanges as early as 4:30 a.m. When these blacks do get work, they're usually paid by the day for jobs like loading trucks and sweeping floors. The government did react to the 1976 riots. It held elections for a new community council in Soweto. But Sowetan activists called the council a sham and boycotted the elections. Only 6% of the voters turned out.
But they're not working.
Supporters of the council argued it would give Soweto's blacks some control
So
over
the way
life
they
in the
got registered
townships,
was by
and
you
that it
and
would be
other people going
effective
and
with
financing
powers
it.
over revenue.
Oh, look at this. Oh, okay.
The elected council chairman was David Tebahali. He's always defied those critics who said urban blacks wouldn't really be able to participate in running their own affairs. It seems Tebahali has always believed in the possibility of real change through government-backed channels.
They've called us all sorts of names. They've called us puppets. And they've said that we are stooges. And they've said that we are extensions of government agencies whose responsibility is to make life absolutely difficult for the black people in South Africa. But I think today, on this very important and historic occasion, we can stand up straight and walk with our heads high in the sky and call on those critics that they must look down at their own shoes.
His opponents even bombed Tebahali's car in Soweto. They say ultimate power rests with white officials. And so, they say, the council helps perpetuate white authority. Tebahali has his own opinions as to why anyone should place a bomb in his car.
Well, I think people have come to realize that we as a council are becoming effective. And I think this is one of the major reasons that we are, as a council, responding to the needs of the residents of Soweto, and we see our responsibility to change the environment in which the people are living and to make Soweto a proper residential area of the people of Soweto. And there are forces, and perhaps a small number of people who are part and parcel of these forces, who are working against this new move of making life worthwhile and meaningful for the residents of Soweto.
Tebahali can point to achievements. It was he who signed the contract for electrification of Soweto housing. His most ambitious project, a $400 million development loan to be raised in Europe and the US. The goal is to build more new housing, more schools, and to improve roads. A year after the Soweto riots, former Bantu administration minister Connie Mulder backed Tebahali and vowed to make Soweto the most beautiful city in Africa. Today, there is improved housing, but it's only available leasehold. The government says that's to stop white property speculators moving in. But blacks say government ownership of the land gives it a legal weapon to dispossess black dissidents. A month before the '76 riots, the administration board chairman said, "The people of Soweto are perfectly content, perfectly happy. There's no danger of a blow-up at all." Critics ask if that view reflects the opinion of today's white administrators. The present chairman, John Knutze, believes there have been major changes in Soweto.
But I've been here for the past 15 months, and I can say categorically that tremendous changes have taken place, particularly insofar as the improvement of conditions which will lead to better and greater numbers of houses are concerned. Unfortunately, it was necessary, as it always is, to provide essential services, sewage, water, electricity, and so on. Since I've arrived here, in the vicinity of 40 million rands have been spent on the upgrading of sewage and water and roads facilities. And the electrification scheme has been got underway, and that means that by the middle of 1983, The whole of Soweto will be electrified at a cost of 204 million rand. And this is the biggest scheme of its kind ever undertaken anywhere in the world. And this is the opinion of the consortium of Siemens and General Electric, which are two international companies. Then we are now reaching the position where we can actually start with the building of houses. And there are approximately 15,000 houses in the pipeline, and the first houses have actually been built. We have obviously first of all catered for the middle class and upper middle class. No houses were built for that sector for a very long time. But we've also reached the stage now where in Soweto we're starting with housing schemes of up to 1,000 houses for the lower income groups and also for the underprivileged.
Can the people in Soweto buy their homes?
Everyone in Soweto can buy his home.
This apprentice training center for blacks near Johannesburg reflects the perspective of the South African government, a vision reinforced by the opening up of more jobs previously reserved for whites, jobs where working-class blacks can better themselves. Critics say the expanding South African economy needs more blue-collar workers, and the government's prepared to bend the principles of apartheid to integrate blacks into industry, to make them more efficient, a more profitable workforce. That bending of apartheid has caused strains in the system. White hardliners resent it, and not all blacks aspire to integration as readily as these. In the same reformist vein, David Tebahali has been determined to raise the standard of living. That means raising money, and that in turn means raising rents. This is met with anti-rent demonstrations led by Dr. Matlana and his Committee of 10 action group. Matlana has been prosecuted for holding unlawful rent meetings, and rents have continued to rise.
Before and
We asked Dr. Matlana why he and his supporters reject the approach of gradual reforms within the present structure of South African society.
South African white person starts to actually make
And what do
change
they propose instead?
without
I once wrote an article for a newspaper and said that when a man gets a stroke, the harm done to the brain is maximal. And that after that, any other change is for the better. You can only improve. South Africa needs a violent, immediate, fundamental structural change. Not violent in the sense of bloodshed and so on, but it must be traumatic. Ab initio. This gradualism, changes over there, Separate Amenities Act, the Group Areas Act, Mixed Marriages Act, Group Areas Act will never work. For each little change that they make, blacks are bound to demand even more. And because of that, whites will always feel that here is a group of ungrateful people who don't appreciate the good we're trying to do for them. What we demand straight away, without any hassles, without any bickering, is that the word race be removed from our constitution. De-mythologize race, I have said. Because we will not accept any gradual changes, not with Zimbabwe, ruled by black men, not with Namibia, to be soon to be ruled by black men. Can we in South Africa accept that whatever have been described as the most developed blacks on the subcontinent must be content with these little peripheral, meaningless changes? There are no stages to that kind of change. It must be immediate, traumatic, fundamental, structural.
wonderful.
Many Sowetans may be skeptical about official political change. But after the riots, a whole generation became politically aware. Steve Biko, the black activist who died in a police cell, became a symbol of their struggle. His funeral was a solemn consecration of the new black consciousness. That black consciousness has rarely been allowed to surface. 4 years ago, the government banned the leading black radical groups. It forced them underground. But terrorist attacks have continued, like this recent blown-up rail line in Soweto, another protest against the Republic's 20th anniversary. The militant wing of the banned African National Congress is widely held to be responsible. They've also called a general strike. It's against this background of growing militancy that significant changes have taken place for urban blacks on the industrial front. Changes inspired less by government goodwill than by increased black agitation. There have been strikes like this one in the Cape, directed against a British firm. A unified front has forced issues like the recognition of labor unions and committees. One result, black wage hikes have doubled the pace of white wage rises. The new atmosphere has spread to Johannesburg. There last summer, more than 6,000 municipal workers struck for higher pay. Trash cans overflowed, garbage filled the streets. Behind the strike was the unofficial Black Municipal Workers Union. In the end, the strike failed. Workers went back on the job when the city council threatened to fire them. Many strikers were deported by bus to their tribal homelands. Yet the strike was one of the biggest to hit an employer in South African history. The wave of militancy has even affected black domestic workers. They were disorganized, finding it tough to unite to raise wages that were notoriously low. But earlier this year, they formed their own union, a union run by women outside the industrial arena, an index of real change in South Africa today. Parallel to these movements, a continuing area of change has been education, the original theme of the Soweto disturbances. A series of school boycotts has focused attention on the state of non-white schooling. The activists were pointing not just to the use of Afrikaans as the language of instruction. That soon changed after the Soweto riots. They also protested at the poor state of black schools, underqualified teachers, overcrowding. They claimed the education system was designed to keep blacks in an inferior position. Behind the students' grievances, then, lay claims of racial discrimination, claims that led them to contest the validity of the whole apartheid system. This is why education is such a key issue in South Africa. Last year in Johannesburg, police stood by for a student rally, called in solidarity with striking students in Cape Town. The students want a single educational system for all races, equal salaries for all teachers, non-racial sport. At the height of the boycotts, over 120,000 pupils refused to attend classes. When colored pupils stayed away, many black children did the same.
So now we stand at last where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent ears, thou hast brought us thus far on the way. And what we are also saying today quite clearly and loudly is that apartheid cannot work.
The boycotts have now largely ended. What have they achieved? Heavy-handed police reaction and Steve Biko's death had already helped mobilize non-white students into political action. Now, in the same way, the protests against inferior education were to push a whole generation of young blacks into the front line of political conflict. This was last year, on the 4th anniversary of the Soweto riots. But there have been more concrete changes as well. New schools have been built, others have been modernized. The first tentative steps are being taken to introduce compulsory education in Soweto, where some private schools have been taken over. But the changes have met with opposition from militant groups like the Congress of South African Students and the Azanian Students Organization. They say the changes only perpetuate two systems of education here, one for whites, the other for non-whites. They say the building of new schools does not alter that basic setup. Most important of all, critics say the introduction of compulsory education has to be set in the social and economic context of apartheid. These doubts are voiced by noted educationalist Wilkie Kambuli.
Mr. Kambuli, how do you visualize compulsory education becoming part of a system that works socially?
You see, compulsory education would only work if it was in the same essence as it is for whites. Everybody being put into the camp, everybody being provided for as part of the family, so that nobody will say there's differential treatment. Then, of course, it will solve quite a number of problems, and also meaning that the government, by introducing education for free movement, then it means the society, group areas acts, and all the other things should move. Many of the parents who otherwise cannot provide for their children in an environment where they are grouped in Soweto will be able to place their children in better environments and look after them. But the situation in Soweto is such that most of them live in two-roomed houses. The mother leaves at 6 in the morning. The father leaves at 6:30. Very, very young children are left on their own, hence the delinquency essence that is so prevalent in Soweto. And that can be solved as long as that 1.25 million people are compelled by legislation to live there and can change their mode of life.
Everywhere you look in Soweto, you can see the problems black families will face with compulsory education. For while their parents work, many older children stay at home to care for younger brothers and sisters. And they do chores their parents don't have time to do. In this context, compulsory education seems unlikely to appease the aspirations of activists like Dr. Matlana.
The only change I can refer to with some confidence is the obvious school building program that has taken place in Soweto, that's still taking place. But that school building program is of no significance if you take into account that the funding or the money spent on black education is still so infinitesimal compared to what they're spending on whites. In fact,
as dawn rises once again over Soweto, the peaceful scene may be deceptive. For the people living here face a dilemma, whether to see government concessions as victories for their struggle, or simply as appeasement, making apartheid more palatable, in fact, reinforcing it. On the 5th anniversary of the Soweto riots, the government is seeing many militant blacks take the reforms and ask for more. For them, the real battle is still to come.